album down. We have 5 more to go. I believe I lead off the next segment, but before I lead off the segment on REO Speedwagon-Hi Infidelity, I'm going to turn it over to Matt, who's going to run the numbers.
So High Infidelity comes in at number 501 in the 1980s on Best Ever Albums from the 1980s. Number 67 in the year 1980, number 3,191 of all time. It is REO Speedwagon's highest rated album. Not in Rolling Stone's list. This has to be a John special, is my guess.
This is definitely a John special because I'll go backwards. I think I told the story on our good friend Bob's podcast.
Yeah, I remember this. Yep.
Scoop. Yep. And the first album I ever remember receiving as a gift was Wheels Are Turnin' by REO Speedwagon, which was, I believe, a 1983 release, but I would have gotten it around about 2 years later after that, off the strength of I Can't Fight This Feeling was the song that I think 4 or 5-year-old me had listened to and had connected with, which is funny for those that know my musical taste. But you know, when you're 4 or 5, it's a little bit different taste, and I'm not quite sure where I came across it, but it was definitely the first album that I ever had bought for me, Wheels. And I remember listening to it, and I remember even, guys, taking my attempt at the age of 6 of writing my own songs at that time, inspired by REO Speedwagon. I believe I came up with a song called Strong Hands at that time that my sister still enjoys. I will not share what that sounds. It's the level of virtuosity that you would expect from a 6-year-old trying to write a song. But I thought it was a very fair attempt. I think I was too much maligned by my sister and my parents for my time. I asked them how many songs they had written before, and of course the answer was none.
Were you writing that on any instrument, or was it just a cappella, John?
I as many of you guys know, I am I don't even know if you guys, I am a person who keeps like a legal pad around at all times and jots stuff down. I have done it my entire life. And this was the earliest stages of that, and I guess I just decided somewhere along the line that I was gonna write my own songs. And you know, when you're 6, the wind's behind your back, and so I remember just jotting it down and crossing out stuff, and I think I might have even submitted it as a writing assignment for one of my classes in English.
So you're talking about writing,
whatever. Well, not English. You're right. Yeah. No, hey, not to pat my own back, but the humanities came easier to your old buddy John.
Well, you talk about writing. You're talking about you wrote the lyrics. Were you writing melodies? Of
course not. Of course I wasn't writing complex.
You said I wrote my own song. You said I wrote
the lyrics to a song. All right.
You said you wrote.
This is where you and I are different, because you always think of music as a song, Matt, and I.
When you're talking about music, a song usually has music with it. If it doesn't, it's poetry.
Yeah, did you have? I mean, you must have had a melody in your head when you wrote the lyrics.
I did. Yeah, I hummed something that it was supposed to sound like, and I put lyrics on front of it.
Okay, that's what.
Unlike Matt, who would just make music and then farm it out to somebody fucking else. So
I would use the words to say, if I wrote a song, I would assume that there was music associated with it. Yeah. But anyway,
I had a baby Mozart over here. I had a general idea of what it was supposed to sound like, and I believe with like my voice, I made sounds. I wasn't sure what could make these sounds. A vaguely guitar, right? Or I guess anyway. So that's my story with REO Speedwagon, and here's what I'd say about REO Speedwagon. Say what you want about REO, and they've been around for freaking forever, by the way. Because there you go. Well, REO Speedwagon has been around since like the early 70s. So like when they were hitting, they'd been like a band for like 10 years.
We never covered them.
Yeah. Well, and they just existed as sort of like a gigging band that played in like the Midwest and places, and just kind of, it's crazy too, because they sold a fairly large number of albums while still being pretty much obscure in the general realm of tastemakers, certainly. And then like AOR comes and Stadium Rock, and suddenly REO Speedwagon, who also is like the least likely looking band to ever play rock and roll, right? Like in terms of like, it's just funny because they come in the video era and you look at them and you're like, God, this is a band like uniquely not well suited for it, but this is the era that they hit, and they're a very interesting story. And I mean, this album is just like the definition of AOR to me. It is very produced. It's designed to be played on the radio. You get the feeling they're just in the studio and being like, we're gonna go for it on this goddamn album. We're gonna just put out, just big ballads, the broadest guitars we could possibly put on the album. I mean, exactly the type of things that like my 6-year-old ears heard, right? Like these big, undeniable, guitar parts. They're not complicated, certainly. They're played for like anywhere between 10 to 15 seconds, in there, and then the production's there, like big building choruses. But it's hard to deny that songs like Keep On Lovin' You and Take It On the Run are not just songs that are just hard to dislike for someone like me. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that they're, high art, right? But with that being said, it just was it's a very enjoyable listen, because outside of maybe Boston, I don't know if we've covered really. We did Foreigner too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We did Foreigner, so Foreigner and Boston, and we did Foreigner Double Vision. I think this was a much better album than Double Vision was, certainly. I don't think it's quite that. It's certainly not the album that Boston is. The guitar chops and stuff are just much higher on that. But I have to say that I found this enjoyable despite myself, and I did listen to it a second time to see if it would wear on me, listen to it a second time, but I actually found a little bit more enjoyability the second time, because instead of trying to analyze it from sort of a critical lens, I'm just literally taking it on the run, like as we're going, just basically just saying, you know what, sometimes you need rock music that can be played in the car, or in the case of when I had Rock Band, you could always put on Take It On the Run, right, and just belt that bad boy out. And the guitars are huge and the vocals are huge, and while it's not my number one preferred type of music, there's an undeniable, like uncomplicated, straight ahead pop quality to this, with just enough rock that you identify it as rock and roll music, that I have to say I like this. So I have to say this is a thumbs up for me, for sure.
Well, I'm not as high on this album as you are. I really kind of did not like this album outside of the two big hits, Keep On Loving You and Take It On the Run, which I agree are like designed to be sung along to, and they're kind of infectious in that way. I was hoping that maybe, not really knowing REO Speedwagon, I really have no relationship to them. I think I knew their singles and kind of knew they were always around, but I lumped them in with Styx and Foreigner and like all those other kind of 80s bands.
You didn't sing along with Tough Guys? Come on, you had to have sung along with Tough Guys, because I found myself singing in the shower one day to Tough Guys.
And that Little Rascals clip in the beginning, that's an interesting use of
a classic one. The what is it? The She-Man, no
He-Man,
He-Man,
Haters.
Yeah, Woman Haters Club. Yeah.
So I don't know that none of the other songs on the album kind of took it to the heights of those two songs. They seem very, like you said, they're well produced. They're designed to appeal to the most amount of people possible. But as a result, it kind of like drains some of the originality or specialness of the band to me, and it kind of becomes washed out, and I found the songs forgettable as a result. I guess, like you said, they're kind of designed to be played in the car, or here at the dentist or something, I guess. But like this wouldn't be a band that has kind of that extra quality to me that would make them your favorite band, or would stand the test of time, at least. I mean, they sold a ton of albums in the 80s, so I can't deny that they were popular, but they're just, I don't know, it's kind of like how I felt about Pat Benatar last week or the week before, where it just, this band is, I don't know, this band doesn't reach reappraisal status for me. They're not some sort of hidden gem. They don't reach the level of Boston to me as well. And I can respect what they were trying to do. They kind of are trying to toe this ground between like kind of throwback band, In Your Letter is kind of like a doo-wop song. And,
yep. Mm-hmm.
They try and throw some blues in there with I Wish You Were There, which is the last track. And they have, I don't know, a lot of ballads and a lot of, I don't know, just like, I know, does this band, I know you guys kind of harped on me for saying generic for Pat Benatar, but this band seems generic too to me. So, I don't know. I just, this album was fine. I not like, yes, I need to hear more REO Speedwagon. I like the fact that people call them Speedwagon, shorten their name when they're referencing them, but I don't know, Matt. What do you have a relationship with REO Speedwagon? You see them on
Rock Band. Rock Band. No, Rock Band. I definitely had with Take It on the Run, and I knew their hits, but there's plenty of stuff on here I didn't know. I would also like to point out that this is their 9th album.
Yeah,
which,
that's crazy.
I was just like very surprised to learn that. So I don't know what
they had a whole goddamn career before this album.
Yeah,
there's only been a couple of other bands I think that have that many albums before we've covered them.
Like AC/DC was like Highway to Hell was like their 7th album, I think. Right. Which is another one that was surprising. It's like, really, they'd been around that long? But
Fleetwood Mac's the one that comes to mind for me because they had like a whole like 10-year run, and then they made Rumors, and it's like
they were like 3 different bands before Rumors came out. So Josh, man, that's really critical. There's ear candy all over this album. I love this album, and the stuff I knew I liked Keep on Loving You. I knew I really liked Take It on the Run. That's just a great song, very, very just anthemic and catchy, and I love Kevin Cronin. Is he the lead singer? He's got a great voice, and so I've always liked the sound. It's very crisp, polished sound. I agree the production's really good, but the first half of this album, God, Don't Let Him Go is a great opening track. It's got the Bo Diddley beat. I found myself really getting into that. Follow My Heart kind of is a generic song, but that chorus got to me. It was infectious. The more I listened to it, the more I liked it. In Your Letter is totally up my alley with the doo-wop and catch. How do you not love that song? How do you listen to that song and not just go, man, what a fun, beautiful, well-constructed pop song that is. It's so good. Tough Guys was great. Out of Season has a really good chorus. It's really not until Shaking It Loose where I start to kind of lose a little affinity for it. I think that's the last 3 songs. They're decent. They do fall a little bit more into the generic realm, but I still liked them. And this was very problem saying how much I like this. Yes, is this high art? No. Is this the best album of the 80s? No, not even close. But in terms of just if you want to listen to music just to enjoy yourself, to have that ear candy go through you, really, well produced, well written songs, well performed songs, then this is a great album for that, and it's kind of towing that line of being really, really popular. Obviously, it sold a ton of copies and did really well, but it's also like it's not. I don't think that this is overly cheesy or just boring or generic even. I don't think I would call this generic. It definitely sounds like REO Speedwagon in a lot of times. So I really liked it. And I know it's not a cool band to like, but I don't care. I'll put this. Anybody wants to put on High Fidelity when I'm around, I'm all for it. This is a big thumbs up for me.
It's hard to write songs as catchy as the big hits on this, and even some of the other ones there. I mean, they really have a way with the chorus, I would say, that I have an appreciation for, because they have choruses that consistently got stuck in my head, even the deeper cuts, which is not easy to do. There's also, can I point out that that running bass line is on nearly every REO Speedwagon track on the entire album. You know the bass part I'm talking about, right? That comes in every single song. It's if you've ever, for those that may not be familiar with the sound of REO Speedwagon, but you are of Bon Jovi, it's the same type of bass sound that I think most commonly is heard in Living on a Prayer, in the sense it's dun 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 dun, that sort of running, galloping sort of bass sound that's super produced. That is all over this album, as is sort of like the studio where someone's studio guitar where someone's at a dial and it's like guitar in now, like, you know what I mean, at exactly the spot. And that's the one knock on AOR I do have, is that it's so polished that there's no grit as well. So I think, Josh, because of what you've been responding to in some of these albums that are very produced, that might be a particular difficult thing for you. But I tend to fall more on the side of Matt of this album. I smiled as I listened to it because the fact that most of the songs breezed by, and you know, it wasn't hard for me to figure out like where I stood on this album. Like, enjoyed it, but it's rare we on this podcast can appreciate an album as just sort of like radio rock. And so maybe that's why it stood out, because we haven't done a lot of radio rock, and maybe if we did a whole bunch of radio rock, it would blend in, but for right now, it didn't, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear like people's stories of being, you know, seeing them in concert and
well, I just imagine picking up like you're like 14 years old when High Infidelity comes out, and you pick up like your high school girlfriend in your car, and like you try to make out with her, like that's it. Or like you have a high school dance and you're like dancing to like Keep on Loving You, you know what I mean? It's like, it just seems like that's, and the other thing would be you go to your local bar and you're mid to late 20s, early 30s, and you're basically just sitting there having a beer, and like in the background you hear like, let's hear it for the lost, the rough boys, near. There's a lot of like Billy Joel in that song, but like a better Billy Joel to some degree is like how I took that. Like they even incorporate like that Rough Boys song is kind of like them trying to do like tough guy type rock, you know, and then the rock, you know, the 50s like sort of like Donovan, Frankie Valli, but like there's something more charming about the way the REO Speedwagon did it for me than when some other folks do it. So maybe, I don't know, it just clicked for me.
Yeah, I mean, I could see people like, you know, disregarding them and stuff like that, but I mean, just get past all like the, you know, the groundbreaking artistic nature of stuff, which makes music, you know, generally speaking, interesting and provocative, and just enjoy a fun record, you know, from time to time. Well, you know,
and they write love songs too, but they write different love songs than Prince. You know, they're not writing like Do It All Night here. You know what I mean? They're writing sort of like the lyrics. I mean, I'm the lyrics guy. I can't defend the lyrics on this album. The lyrics are as boilerplate as they get. It's basically, I think it's just, you get a word, and then you're like, okay, so for the next 3 verses, we're going to have the same rhyme. So how do we get to that rhyme? So that's,
you got to get past that, Yeah,
I was about to say. And I was not listening to this album even though I'm so-called lyrics guy, I can get past it in certain instances, especially when what the music is designed for is not to, I think, make a deep statement. I think the music is just to score, or the lyrics are just to score the general idea of going to a concert that you bought a ticket for $1.25, you know, on the cheap seats, you know, and you got like a 12-pack of Bush Pounders, and you go see REO Speedwagon at like, you know, the Detroit Civic Center, you know, like that's, I feel like this was that era, you know?
Yep. Yeah. The this is their highest selling album that sold more than 10 million copies and had 4 top 40 hits, with Keep on Loving You is the number one on that number one hit. Take It on the Run went to number 5 on the Billboard.
What were the other 2 singles, out of curiosity?
Don't Let Him Go and In Your Letter.
In Your Letter makes sense. Don't Let Him Go. Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
So this was also the biggest selling album of 1981. So they had a long, well, you know, things played longer, and there was kind of a longer leash on.
Well, one of the things that I made sure of for this decade, Matt, in terms of picking albums, was I wanted to make sure that the highest selling album of each year was also covered by us. Nice. And so that's another reason why this ended up in the charts.
That's that's good. I appreciate that.
Now, most of them fell in the top 100, you know, like Thriller and stuff like that, but there were a couple that didn't. So, and this was one of them. So that's how this found its way to the charts. Yeah.
I feel like that, like when I really like looking at old movie like box office things and when things were released at, you know, I went back and looked at what movies were released on Memorial Day and stuff like that, and it's, you know, what's popular is not always what's considered the best in the long term. So I like seeing, you know, kind of what the zeitgeist, I guess what was popular in pop culture at the time.
It gives you a sketch of the time.
Yeah, you get a different appreciation of things. So I'm glad I listened to that for that reason.
Okay, so it sounds like 2 thumbs up and a thumbs down. Is that an accurate reflection?
Yes, I would agree.